Okay, welcome to the deep dive.
Right.
Today we're jumping into the world of author Tony Hillerman, specifically his novel Skinwalkers, and also the real-world backdrop he used the Navajo Nation.
Yeah, and you've given us a great set of sources to work with here. We've got bits where Hillerman talks about his own writing process, how he put the books together.
Right, and specific plot points, character stuff from Skinwalkers itself.
And then there's this profile of the Navajo Nation, which gives that essential context.
So our goal is basically to walk you through these sources, pull out the really important bits, maybe some surprising facts, and just help connect the dots,
Mm.
between the fiction, the characters, and the actual place and culture.
Think of it like getting a quick, solid briefing on a really fascinating subject.
Exactly. So let's dive right in. Where did Hillerman's stories actually come from? What the sources show is just how much he drew from, well, real life.
Mm-hmm. It wasn't just abstract ideas. It was triggered by things he saw, events that happened, cultural things he observed.
Right. It wasn't just, I need a plot. It was seeing something specific
Yeah.
or experiencing something. And that sparks a question, right? Or a feeling that becomes the core.
Like with Hunting Badger, the sources say the whole idea started with a real crime. Some guys stole a water truck, killed a cop.
And the FBI response was just famously botched.
Yeah, a total mess. The murder wasn't avenged. The local towns took an economic hit. Just this lingering frustration. And
Yeah.
Hillerman built the story right around that real, raw situation.
And it wasn't just events, right? Places themselves were huge triggers.
Oh, absolutely. The source mentions him seeing a roofless stone hogan, the traditional Navajo home out on the Cannon Cedar Reservation.
Okay.
And it had that hole knocked in the north wall,
Yeah.
which traditionally is how the spirit, the chindi, leaves if someone dies inside, so the death doesn't linger. Seeing that empty hogan just immediately sparked the question for the ghostway. Why? Why wasn't the person moved outside before they died? That single image, that question, was the hook.
Wow. And sometimes it was even more, like, granular than that. The raft trip for A Thief of Time.
Oh, yeah, that's a great example. The source lists all these details he observed: swallows, beaver, frogs, coyotes, bats.
Capella pictograph,
Yeah.
that flute player figure.
Right, exactly. Seeing this big cliff dwelling like an amphitheater with a seep. And it wasn't just window dressing. It apparently completely changed the first chapter he had planned.
Holy hell.
It led to that incredibly weird image, dozens of tiny frogs tied up with yucca strings near the ruins.
That's strange.
And then hearing flute music, but it was, hey, Jude, that mix of the ancient site, the traditional symbols like cocopella, modern pop music, and this bizarre detail like the tied-up frogs that came directly from just being there.
That's pure Hillerman. That blend of ancient, modern, real, surreal.
And it often starts with something concrete, something physical. He did the same with cultural practices, too, like the enemy way ceremony.
Mm-hmm. That's for curing illness from witchcraft fears. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And in the blessing way, the villain basically uses those very real fears as a weapon. And Leaphorn figures it out partly by noticing details connected to the ceremony, like sweat stains on a hatband.
So the culture isn't just background, it's baked into the mystery itself.
Totally. And same for Dance Hall of the Dead. The sources say Leaphorn's understanding of Zuni beliefs, specifically the Big Shalako ceremony, was crucial.
How so?
It helped him figure out the motive of this young Zuni kid who was on the run. The kid was trying to contact the Zuni Council of the Gods. Hillerman really dug into the why from a cultural perspective.
It wasn't just big ceremonies either, was it? Sometimes just bumping into people shifted things.
Yeah, definitely. Like in Talking God, he saw this elderly Hispano usher at Mass who just had this interesting aristocratic face.
Okay.
And that sparked the idea. What if he was the victim? And suddenly the plot swings from a simple gang killing to a political assassination.
Wow, just from seeing a face.
And there was another bit, a lonely guy answering a want ad, somehow influenced the assassin's character and even the book's ending, or the idea of an urban Navajo character sending ancestor bones to the Smithsonian. Apparently that got applause from tribesmen Hillerman talked to.
That's amazing, getting that kind of direct feedback and folding it in.
Yeah.
He also seemed to draw on deeper ideas, philosophical concepts.
Yeah, the source mentions him seeing an infant presentation ceremony for sacred clowns. It was described as, like, similar to a Christian baptism, but more than that.
Okay.
And understanding that helped him grasp the really profound sacred status children have in Pueblo philosophy, and also the role of the sacred clans, the kosher,
Yeah.
the ones who comment on life during ceremonies. He felt he shared their view about humans having this special link to the divine, and that came through in the book.
It really sounds like his writing was just this ongoing dialogue with the world he was observing.
Absolutely. And speaking of characters, the sources give a pretty straightforward reason for Officer Jim Chee showing up.
Right, Leaphorn's partner.
Yeah, okay, there was some artistic need. But Hillerman was also pretty blunt that, well, he'd signed away the TV rights for Leaphorn.
Ah, practicalities.
Exactly. He wanted a character he actually fully owned.
A very real-world writer problem. And that quote about fiction telling truth better than facts.
Yeah, he connected that to Colton Wolfe, the character in People of Darkness. That character was apparently inspired by visiting a death row inmate named Smallwood. Some things, maybe some deeper truths, you can only really explore through fiction.
Makes sense. And the setting itself, the checkerboard area.
Right, that was key too. That whole complex mix of Navajo land and other land holdings. The sources point out how the mix of people there, plus all the different religious missions, just created this fascinating, complex social landscape he loved writing about.
Okay, so that gives us a really good sense of how Hillerman built his world, pulling from all these real threads. Now let's use the sources to properly meet Leaphorn and Chee in Skinwalkers.
Sounds good. So first, Lieutenant Joe Leaphorn. He's the older, established guy. But the sources immediately highlight his personal struggle, his wife Emma's Alzheimer's.
Yeah, that's not just a minor detail in the book, is it?
Not at all. It's portrayed as this huge weight on him. The sources use phrases like numbing loss, knowing what's coming, her forgetting things, even asking who he is. It's heavy. He's doing his job while dealing with this immense personal sadness, even calling the Alzheimer's Association.
And his map. You mentioned the map earlier.
Oh, yeah, the map is brilliant. The sources call it an eccentricity, but it's more than that, right? It's like a symbol of his deep connection to the res.
It's just an auto club map, but marked up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Covered in colored pins for different crime types, homicide here, burglary there, and all these handwritten notes like quicksand here, road washes out in heavy rain, sheep camp, suspected witchcraft site, bootlegger over there. It's literally a lifetime of living and working there, mapped out.
And that shapes how he sees crime, too.
Totally. He sees homicides as pretty rare, often accidental, different from what he calls white man crimes happening on the edges of the reservation. And he's pragmatic about witchcraft. He marks the sites, but he seems to see it more as a belief system that causes problems rather than actual magic.
He's described as the checkerboard type, physically. What about Chee?
Okay, Jim Chee. Younger guy, still kind of finding his path. But what's really unique, the sources emphasize, is that he's training to be a yatale.
A singer, a healer, performs ceremonials like the Blessing Way.
Exactly. He studied with a respected singer, Frank Sam Nakai. And this training makes him super sensitive to Navajo culture and religion. When he sees people misusing those beliefs cynically, he sees it as actual sacrilege.
And he believes in witchcraft more literally than Leaphorn.
Oh, yeah. For Chee, it's not just folklore. It's a real potential for evil in the world. But at the same time...
He's still a modern cop.
Right. He's juggling this deep traditional connection with everyday police work and his own background. The sources mention him living in this beat-up trailer near Shiprock. And this detail about the smell of wilted leaves reminding him of being poor as a kid, thin horses, dying sheep, worried parents, not enough food, saving water... It's a real contrast to his spiritual side.
He's described physically as the Tuba City Navajo type, tall, lean.
Yep. And that letter he gets from Alice Yazzie asking him to do a blessing way sing for someone outside his own family.
That was a big deal.
Huge, according to the sources. His first real invitation like that, a big validation for him as a singer, gave him this real sense of satisfaction.
So how do they interact initially in the book, based on the sources?
Well, when Chee's trailer gets shot up, his sergeant, Largo, is immediately like, nah, couldn't be, just skeptical.
Okay.
Leaphorn's more careful. He doesn't entirely trust Chee at first, apparently, and he really doesn't like this weird bone bead they find near the trailer.
The bead again.
Yeah, but even with his doubts, Leaphorn recognizes Chee is smart. So you've got this dynamic, the pragmatic veteran and the younger, more spiritually attuned officer, different but both deeply connected to the place and the job.
Okay, characters established. Let's get into the actual mysteries in Skinwalkers as the sources lay them out. Leaphorn's already working some cases.
Right, they're on his map. There's Dugai Indochini stabbed multiple times, and weirdly, a dime was left in the wound.
That dime.
Then Irma One-Salt, shot. She was known as welfare woman, tough, mean. The kind of person the source says everyone might have had a reason to shoot.
Charming.
And Wilson Sam, hit with a shovel, body dumped down a canyon.
So initially, no connection, no motive, no witnesses.
None. Completely baffling, especially the One-Salt case for Leaphorn.
Yeah.
Just why?
And then she gets directly involved.
Yeah, his trailer shot up, 3 shotgun blasts, aimed low, hip high, like they were aiming for someone sleeping.
And the clues outside.
Small tracks, rubber shoes, size 7, leading to vehicle tracks, worn tires, an oil leak, and near the riverbank, by his cat's den, that bone bead turns up.
There it is again. This feels important.
It usually is with Hillerman. Then the sources introduce Dr. Bahé Yellowhorse. Big guy, traditional dress, founded the Bad Water Clinic.
And he's also a crystal gazer, a traditional diagnostician.
Correct. Leaphorn's view of him is, complicated. He finds him a pain in the ass, apparently.
Oh.
But he also respects the guy's effort. Knows his backstory, orphaned, used his inheritance and grants to build this clinic that people really needed.
But this is where Chee and Leaphorn really differ. Right?
Big time. Chee is absolutely convinced Yellowhorse is a fake, just using religion to make money.
Because Chee takes the religion so seriously.
Exactly. Leaphorn's much more pragmatic. The source quotes him basically asking, look, what real harm is he doing? If he sends people with traditional problems to traditional healers and people with, Western problems to Western doctors.
That's a fundamental clash in perspective right there.
It really is. Okay, so the plot picks up speed. A telex comes in naming Roosevelt Bisty as a suspect in the Indochini killing. His truck was seen. He'd made threats.
Okay, elite.
Chee goes to talk to Bisty's daughter. She mentions her father's sick liver problems, maybe. Says he saw a crystal gazer named Two Story, needed a specific ceremony, a mountaintop way, sing. And crucially, she says Bisty was looking for some guy near the Utah border about 2 weeks earlier. Which is the right time and potentially the right place for Wilson Sam's murder.
Interesting. The daughter's view of the cops is mentioned, too.
Yeah, just a small detail calls one the young Belagana, the white guy, and the other the fat Navajo. Just adds that layer of how people see outsiders, even Navajo outsiders in uniform.
Another piece comes from the pathologist, Jenks.
Right. Irma One-Salt, the tough woman who got shot, had gone to see Jenks before she died. She wanted death dates for 2 women, Ethel Mary Large Whiskers and Woody's mother.
Why would she want death date?
Exactly the question. Jenks thought the names were just kind of quaint. The sources mention it's hard to get those details anyway because Navajo families often object to autopsies for religious reasons.
So One-Salt asking felt weird to him.
Very weird. Then you get the trading post visits, which are critical. Chee goes to Badwater Wash Trading Post, meets a woman called Iron Woman.
Okay.
The source describes the scene. Chee waiting politely in the car, the people on the porch, an expensive truck parked there. It paints a picture. Iron Woman knew Indochini and Sam. And she gives Chee the key info. She got a letter for Wilson Sam back in June, hand-addressed, postmarked Window Rock Agency Social Services. It was about money for his grandson Singh, $400.
Okay, so there was money involved.
Yes. And she specifically says Sam put the money in his wallet or maybe his strongbox. Chee gives her his Yatalaye card, that singer identity, making a connection.
Leaphorn follows up at another trading post.
Yeah, Short Mountain Trading Post. Talks to McGinnis, the owner, who's got a for sale sign up. McGinnis is described as having strong opinions about Navajo versus white theft.
Okay.
He also knew Sam, also got the letter for him, confirms it was from Social Services in Window Rock about the Sing money, $400, and again confirms Sam put it away safely.
So both trading post owners confirm Sam got this money from Social Services for a ceremony.
Exactly. And this is Leaphorn's breakthrough. That specific information about the letter to Sam, combined with the clues from the attack on Chee, small shoe prints, the specific aim.
It clicks.
It clicks. He realizes the cases aren't separate. They all cluster around the Badwater Clinic area. It's one crime, one motive. Bisty's killing later is different, though, like the violence turned on itself.
So the hunt leads to Bisty's house.
Yes. And the description is chilling. This acrid smell, like burned meat. The house is tidy, but there's an overturned chair, a wet washcloth, signs of a struggle.
And drag marks.
Yeah, polished, dust-free drag marks leading outside towards some rocks and a hogan. Leaphorn follows them.
And gets shot.
Shot in the arm, yeah.
Okay, so the climax is at the clinic.
Right. Leaphorn races there.
Yeah.
And the person with the shotgun,
Yeah.
it's Bisty's daughter.
The woman she spoke to. Why is she shooting?
She thinks Chee is the Skinwalker, the witch who made her baby sick. And she shoots Dr. Yellowhorse, yelling, "The Skinwalker is dead! This time I killed him!"
Oh my God. But Yellow Horse wasn't the Skinwalker.
No. The sources explain the awful truth. Yellowhorse is dead. The baby died of Werdnig-Hoffmann disease, a terrible genetic disorder, not witchcraft.
The daughter just didn't understand.
She didn't understand the diagnosis. Leaphorn explains the real motive. Yellowhorse was committing billing fraud, using the names of patients who were dead or discharged to steal money.
And Irma Onesall found out. That's why she wanted the death dates.
Exactly. She was asking Jenks about the very people Yellowhorse was fraudulently billing under. The FBI confirms they were already looking into his billing records.
Wow. So the motive was just money.
Desperate need for money, seems like. The source mentions he used mostly his own inheritance and grants for the clinic, but quotes him saying, "Guess it wasn't enough. Not even with hiring immigrant doctors, just sheer desperation leading to crime."
It's such a tragic collision of modern problems, like fraud, and these deeply held traditional beliefs about witches and illness.
It really is. And this is where that profile of the Navajo Nation you shared adds such important context. These stories aren't just happening anywhere, they're rooted in the specific realities of that place.
Yeah, the profile mentions the governance structure, judicial chapters, the council, their status as a domestic dependent nation.
Right, that unique legal relationship with the U.S. But it's the part about permanent issues that really hits home, underlining everything in the novel.
The poverty statistics are stark.
Incredibly stark. 56% below the poverty line, low income per person, not much economic development on the reservation, so money flows out.
And the infrastructure challenges.
Huge. 77% of roads are dirt or gravel, the sources say. Lack of electricity, clean water, phones, even basic police and fire protection in many areas. Housing issues, too. Lots of homes without full plumbing or kitchens.
And you see how these things ripple through the story.
Absolutely. This is the reality behind Chee's memories of childhood poverty, the reason his trailer is described as battered. It explains why places like the trading posts are so vital.
And why a clinic like Yellow Horse's, even with its problems, was so needed, but also probably struggling financially.
Exactly. These conditions create the backdrop for crime linked to hardship bootlegging, maybe, theft, or in Yellowhorse's case, this desperate fraud. It also explains why traditional healing ceremonies, which cost money, are still so important when access to Western medicine might be difficult or limited.
Hillerman really seemed to master weaving these tough realities, the economic pressures, the culture clashes right into the fabric of the mysteries. They aren't just setting, they drive the plot and the characters.
He really did. It gives the story such weight.
So let's wrap this up. Key takeaways from this deep dive. We've seen Hillerman's incredible skill in blending real-world details, sometimes surprising ones, into complex mysteries.
Yeah, how a specific crime or a building or a river trip could just spark everything.
We've gotten a clear picture of Leaphorn and Chee, the pragmatic veteran dealing with personal loss, and the younger idealist navigating tradition and modern policing.
Two really distinct but complementary characters, both deeply rooted in their world.
And we followed the trail in Skinwalkers, seeing how clues tied to culture, local knowledge, and just good police work uncovered a crime driven by financial desperation, but tragically tangled up with belief systems about witchcraft and healing.
The sources definitely gave us a great shortcut to understanding how Hillerman put all that together and the real world it reflects.
So here's something to think about. How does that mix or sometimes clash between traditional ways and modern systems like healthcare or law enforcement create unique problems and challenges in a place like the Navajo Nation? And maybe, how do those deep socioeconomic issues we talked about, the poverty and lack of resources, influence people's choices, maybe even push them towards the kind of desperate actions we saw in the story?
Definitely a lot to chew on there.
For sure. Okay, that's it for this deep dive.